killed Elvis Presley?
No, drugs had nothing to do with his death.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. That was proven and shown in my book.
Elvis Presley's passing was never about wild rumors or reckless behavior, and it certainly was not some simple explanation people have repeated for decades. For nearly 50 years, the world believed it already understood what happened in August of 1977, until science quietly reopened a door everyone thought was closed forever. Hidden in a freezer in Memphis was a forgotten biological sample preserved since the very day Elvis left this world, untouched, unnoticed, and waiting for technology that did not yet exist. When that sample was finally examined using modern genetic tools in 2025, it revealed a story far more complex, far more human, and far more tragic than anyone expected. Elvis was only 42 when he was found unresponsive at Graceland, the home he loved. The shock rippled across the world, freezing time for millions of fans who felt as if a piece of music itself had gone silent. Standing nearby that morning was his longtime physician, a man who had watched Elvis battle unexplained health struggles for years. Endless exhaustion, confusion, physical pain that never seemed to have a clear cause. Something had always felt wrong, but medicine at the time could not explain it. Acting on instinct, he preserved a small biological sample, carefully labeled with Elvis's full name and a note asking future scientists to handle it with care, believing one day the truth would finally surface. That sample disappeared into storage as the years passed. Elvis was laid to rest at Graceland after crowds became overwhelming elsewhere, and questions never stopped. Stories grew, theories spread, and speculation filled the silence where answers should have been. Meanwhile, that small frozen vial remained hidden in plain sight for decades, passed over by countless researchers who had no idea what was sitting just inches away from history. Everything changed when a modern research team began cataloging old medical materials connected to historical figures. One faded label stopped them cold. The room went silent as they realized what they had found. Elvis's genetic material was real, preserved, and still viable. Gaining permission to study it took nearly 2 years of legal battles, strict agreements, and intense privacy protections. Nothing would be shared without approval. Every test would be monitored. Every result would remain locked away. When analysis finally began, scientists uncovered a powerful story written directly into Elvis's biology. His ancestry reflected the diversity of America itself, rich in heritage and resilience, but also burdened with inherited health challenges. Multiple generations in his family experienced early heart failure, unstable energy levels, and metabolic strain. What stunned researchers was that Elvis carried rare genetic traits that gave him extraordinary physical ability and creativity, yet demanded an impossible price from his body. His system burned energy at a relentless pace, leaving him unable to rest or recover properly. The same traits that fueled his legendary performances quietly drained him behind the scenes. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A rare genetic variation affecting heart rhythm was identified, one that can remain invisible until a sudden, unpredictable failure occurs. People with this condition often appear strong and healthy until the moment everything stops without warning. This explained decades of unanswered questions and reframed the entire narrative. The pressure of constant performance, lack of rest, and intense emotional stress placed enormous strain on a heart that was already vulnerable from birth. Further examination revealed additional inherited challenges affecting how his cells produced energy and how his brain processed emotion and reward. Individually, these conditions can be managed. Together, they created a perfect biological storm. Fame, expectations, constant travel, and isolation magnified every weakness. The medical support Elvis relied on was not about escape or excess, it was about keeping a failing system functioning long enough to meet the demands placed upon him. What followed was even more heartbreaking. Similar patterns appeared in later generations of the Presley family. Sudden cardiac events, chronic fatigue, emotional restlessness. The connection was undeniable. What the public saw as coincidence was actually inheritance. A legacy written in chromosomes, passed quietly from parent to child. At one point, scientists feared the original sample might not even belong to Elvis due to early testing limitations, sparking renewed mystery, but advanced sequencing technology finally confirmed the truth beyond any doubt. The DNA was his, perfectly matched, and it carried more than just genetic code. It carried biological scars. Markers showing years of extreme stress, isolation, and relentless pressure. His body had been locked in survival mode for decades. Even surrounded by crowds, his biology reflected profound loneliness. The final conclusion changed everything. Elvis was not undone by choices or excess. He was fighting his own biology every single day while carrying the weight of the world's expectations. His story is not one of weakness, but of endurance. He gave everything his body had until there was nothing left to give. The legend did not fall short. He pushed far beyond what most human bodies could ever survive, and the music he left behind stands as proof that even in struggle, something timeless can be created. What the scientists realized next forced them to confront a question far bigger than Elvis himself. If biology had shaped so much of his struggle, then his story was not just about fame or music, it was about how invisible forces inside the body can quietly determine the course of a life. Elvis became the most famous example of something millions of people live with every day without knowing it. Rare genetic traits that look like talent on the outside but behave like ticking clocks on the inside. As the research expanded, doctors began comparing Elvis's genetic profile with thousands of modern patients. Patterns emerged quickly. People carrying similar traits often became high performers. Athletes, artists, innovators, leaders. They had endless drive, intense emotion, and unusual stamina in short bursts. But they also struggled with burnout, sudden health crises, emotional overload, and deep fatigue that no amount of rest could fix. Elvis fit the pattern perfectly. His biology pushed him to give more than most humans ever could, and then demanded payment with interest. One researcher described it as a biological amplifier. Everything Elvis experienced was louder. Joy hit harder. Pressure crushed deeper. Love felt overwhelming. Loneliness felt endless. His nervous system was never quiet. Even when he stood still, his body behaved like it was running a marathon. That constant internal noise slowly wore him down in ways cameras could never capture. This explained why rest never truly restored him. Sleep did not recharge his system the way it does for others. His cells struggled to convert nutrients into usable energy. His heart worked harder even when he was calm. His brain burned fuel at an extreme rate. Over time, every system began compensating for the others, creating a fragile balance that could tip at any moment. The most haunting discovery came from studying how stress shaped his gene expression over time. Genetics are not destiny, but stress can turn certain switches on and leave them stuck. Elvis's DNA showed that by his late 30s, his stress response never fully shut off. His body no longer recognized safety. Every day felt like an emergency at the cellular level. Imagine living in a constant state of alarm, even in silence, even at home, even alone. This biological reality changed how researchers interpreted Elvis's later years. The changes in his appearance, the fluctuations in weight, the moments of withdrawal, the emotional intensity. These were not character flaws. They were symptoms of a system running far past its design limits. His body was adapting in real time to survive pressures no human biology evolved to handle. The isolation was especially damaging. Fame removed normal human boundaries. People surrounded him constantly, yet true connection became rare. Genetic data confirmed what friends had quietly observed. His body reacted to loneliness the same way it reacts to physical danger. Inflammation rose. Immune response dropped. Recovery slowed. The irony was cruel. The man loved by millions was biologically starving for simple human safety. As scientists shared their findings privately with the family, reactions varied. Some felt relief. Others felt grief layered with guilt. For years, narratives had blamed personal failure. Now the evidence showed a man pushing against forces he could never fully control. Understanding came too late to help him, but it might help others. The research team faced an ethical crossroads. What responsibility comes with knowledge like this? Revealing too much could fuel speculation. Revealing too little could hide lessons that might save lives. In the end, they focused on education, not exposure. Elvis's story became a case study used quietly in medical training programs, stripped of celebrity, reduced to biology, stress, and human limits. Doctors began screening more patients with unexplained fatigue, emotional intensity, or sudden heart irregularities. Early detection increased. Lives quietly extended. In that way, Elvis's biology continued to give, even decades after his final performance. But the question that lingered most was not scientific. It was personal. What would Elvis's life have looked like if he had been born 30 years later? With modern genetic screening. With tailored treatment. With understanding instead of judgment. Researchers believe the answer is simple and devastating. He might still be here. Technology today can identify these traits early. Medication can stabilize heart rhythms. Lifestyle adjustments can reduce cellular stress. Emotional regulation therapies can protect the nervous system. None of these existed for Elvis when he needed them most. He was navigating a modern life with outdated tools. As the final reports were sealed, one researcher wrote a private note that never left the lab. It said that Elvis was not built wrong. He was built rare. His biology was tuned for intensity, not longevity. And in a world that demanded constant output, rarity came at a cost. The public image of Elvis remains frozen in time. The voice. The movement. The charisma. But beneath that image lived a human system operating at the edge of possibility. He was not careless. He was not weak. He was not reckless. He was enduring. The music he created now carries new meaning. Every note came from a body working harder than it should have had to. Every performance was an act of resilience. Every song was borrowed time made audible. Science did not diminish the legend. It deepened it. Elvis Presley was not just the king of rock and roll. He was proof of how extraordinary humans can be, and how fragile they remain, even at the highest peaks of success. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this. Behind every icon is a body with limits. Behind every spotlight is a nervous system trying to survive. And behind every legend is a human story far more complex than fame ever shows. If Elvis taught the world how to move, how to feel, how to break boundaries in music, then his biology now teaches something just as powerful. That empathy matters. That health is not always visible. And that sometimes, the strongest people are fighting battles no one can see. His voice still echoes, not just through speakers, but through science, through understanding, and through the quiet realization that greatness often comes with unseen cost. As the research quietly came to an end, the scientists understood something profound. They were not just looking at data anymore. They were looking at a human life translated into code, stress, resilience, and sacrifice. Elvis Presley's story had shifted forever, not because it erased mystery, but because it replaced blame with understanding. For decades, people asked why someone so gifted could struggle so deeply. Why success did not protect him. Why love from millions could not quiet the storm. The answer was never simple, and it was never shallow. His body was running a marathon no one else could see, every single day, with no finish line. The world had demanded perfection without knowing the cost. Endless appearances. Endless performances. Endless expectations. His biology was not designed for endless anything. It was designed for brilliance in bursts, for intensity, for expression, for emotion that overflowed. And that brilliance reshaped music forever. When modern doctors reviewed his case as a whole, many reached the same conclusion. Elvis did not burn out because he gave up. He burned through himself because giving was the only way his system knew how to exist. Stillness felt dangerous. Silence felt unbearable. Movement, sound, connection, creation, those were the only moments his internal world felt aligned. This understanding changed how many experts now view creative genius. High sensitivity, emotional depth, and relentless drive often come bundled together. The same wiring that allows someone to feel music more deeply can also make the nervous system vulnerable. Elvis was not broken. He was tuned differently. In quiet ways, his legacy has already changed medicine. Doctors now look more carefully at patients who seem outwardly strong but internally overwhelmed. People with unexplained fatigue are taken more seriously. Emotional intensity is no longer dismissed as weakness. Genetics is now seen not as destiny, but as context. And that context matters. Because if the world had understood what Elvis's body was enduring, the story told about him would have been different. Compassion would have replaced criticism. Support would have replaced judgment. Care would have replaced expectation. But history does not move backward. It only offers lessons forward. The final sealed report ended with a simple observation. Elvis Presley lived faster than biology allows, not because he chose to, but because his system demanded it. And for 42 years, he answered that demand with music, movement, and heart. He gave the world joy while carrying pain it could not see. He gave energy while running on empty. He gave love while being biologically starved for safety and rest. That does not diminish his greatness. It defines it. Today, people still visit Graceland, still play his records, still feel something when his voice fills a room. That feeling now carries deeper meaning. Every note becomes evidence of resilience. Every lyric becomes proof of endurance. Elvis was not a cautionary tale. He was a human one. A reminder that even legends are built from cells and chemistry. That fame cannot override biology. That empathy should never be optional. And that some of the brightest lights burn intensely because they are fighting the dark from within. The story does not end with loss. It ends with understanding. Because now we know that behind the crown was a body doing its best. Behind the spotlight was a nervous system under siege. And behind the legend was a man who gave everything he had until there was nothing left to give. That is not failure. That is sacrifice. And perhaps that is why his voice still matters. Not just because it changed music, but because it reminds us to look closer, judge less, and remember that strength is not always loud. Sometimes, it sounds like a song that lasts forever.